Okay, I think we'll make a start. So the same format to the morning as yesterday, where we'll salute the three jewels, we'll hear today's section of the Tanisho, we'll chant, sit for a few minutes, I'll give a presentation, tea break, meditation. And before we salute the three jewels, so if you have a look behind me, you can see that the shrine has changed a little. So we still have Amida looking back, calling us towards the Pure Land. But in front of Amida, we have Varochana, the illuminator. Now, what do I want to say about that? Yeah, well, it's this thing where the different form, it's like actually you can't give a form to the enlightened mind. It's like it doesn't, it's like we can give forms to the enlightened mind, but actually they're all just trying to convey something that's sort of like it's not expressible even in a form. So we have Amida, who starts out as a sort of figure in India and then kind of like travels up through China, Japan, and changes iconographically as he goes. And he becomes Amida, the infinite light, infinite life. And the other sort of major Buddha figure that arrives in Japan is Varochana, and he's central to the Shingon school, which is not the one Shinran was ordained in. But in the later Pure Land tradition, Amida and Varochana become identified. In fact, how Shinran puts it is that all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are simply different forms of Amida, simply different forms of the awakened mind. So this is like Bhante saying, there's really only one Bodhisattva. It's like in a way that there's the enlightened mind and then there's just all these different sort of forms and facets. But Varochana is very, very close to Amida. Sort of iconographically, because Amida is this sort of infinite light which goes through space, so it's like infinite space, or else he's known as Amitayus, infinite life, which goes through time, so infinite time, which really means outside of time and space, not bounded by time and space. And actually you have Varochana expressing that in a different form. So Varochana in the Indo-Tibetan model is at the centre of the mandala, like Amida in Japan. And he is brilliant white in colour, like the sunshine on the snow. And he's got his hands at his heart in this mudra of teaching, which is actually also the mudra Maitreya has. And it's like one hand facing out, the circle wisdom, facing out compassion, and this hand facing in wisdom. So you've got two hands, wisdom and compassion. And holding what is most precious at his heart. And what Varochana holds is the Dharma chakra, the wheel of the Dharma. So it's like you can see that as the teaching of the Buddha, but it's also like other power. It's like the sun of other power that just emanates its rays limitlessly throughout space. And that's what's meant by Varochana being the illuminator. And he has this consort, Akasha Dateshwari, whose element is space. And it's like, as a two, they're the pair. It's like light, space. You can't separate them in that sort of way. So So today we're going to be focusing on Varochana, and it's Varochana we're going to salute on the shrine, and we'll be chanting his mantra in just a moment. So let's salute the three jewels. So we'll do this in unison. So settling yourselves. Whatever posture will support receptivity for you. From the Tanisho 2. I believe that the reason you have come here, crossing over more than 10 provinces at the risk of your lives, is solely to ascertain the path that leads to birth in the Pure Land. But if you suspect that I know ways other than the Nembutsu to attain birth, or that I am versed in the scriptures connected with them, you are greatly mistaken. If that be the case, there are many eminent scholars in the monasteries of Nara and Mount Hiei, so you should go to see them and ask them in detail about the way to attain birth in the Pure Land. As for myself, Shinran, I simply take to heart the words of my dear teacher, Honen. Just say the Nembutsu and be saved by Amida, and entrust myself to the primal vow. Besides this, there is nothing else. If Amida's primal vow is true, Shakyamuni's teaching cannot be false. If the Buddha's teaching is true, Shantao's commentaries cannot be false. If Shantao's commentaries are true, how can Honen's words be empty of meaning? If Honen's words are true, what I, Shinran, say cannot be meaningless. In brief, such is the true entrusting of this foolish one. Now, whether you accept the Nembutsu, entrusting yourself to it, or reject it, that's the saying of Nembutsu is neither a religious practice nor a good act, since it is practiced without any calculation. It is non-practice. Since it is also not a good created by my calculation, it is non-good. Since it is nothing but other power, completely free of self-power, it is neither a religious practice nor a good act on the part of the practitioner. Tanisho 10. The Master Shinran said, in the Nembutsu, no self-working is true working. It is beyond description, explanation, and conception. Om Vairocana Hum. 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 Om Vairocana. So just sitting for a few minutes. So this morning we're particularly going to be exploring what is faith? What is faith? And yeah, I think I just say before I start, it's a very particular, I mean, I think it's probably always a bit of a particular experience giving Dharma talks, but I'm experiencing it very strongly at the moment, which is, I am this finite, conditioned being, bound by my passions and my conditioning, my habits, and there's a sort of like small me, and I am talking about what is outside of small me, but it's like there's a tension to it because it's like it's like I'm just I'm Shinran's Bombu, I'm like this numpty, and it's like I'm a numpty and I'm pointing at the stars and I'm saying, look, they're over there. And there's just quite a kind of tension about trying to articulate or trying to explain something that is so beyond the level of my kind of like habitual selfhood. Yeah. Right, so let's hear those bits of the Tanisho again. I have to say, number 2 is one of my favourites. This is one I recite again and again and again. I absolutely love it. I believe that the reason that you have come here, crossing over more than 10 provinces at the risk of your lives, is solely to ascertain the path that leads to birth in the Pure Land. But if you suspect that I know ways other than the Nembutsu to attain birth, or that I am versed in the scriptures connected with them, you are greatly mistaken. If that be the case, there are many eminent scholars in the monasteries of Nara and Mount Hiei, so you should go to see them and ask them in detail about the way to attain birth in the Pure Land. As for myself, Shinran, I simply take to heart the words of my dear teacher, Honen. Just say the Nembutsu and be saved by Amida, and entrust myself to the primal vow. Besides this, there is nothing else. So there's another paragraph comes in there, which we're going to look at tomorrow. If Amida's primal vow is true, Shakyamuni's teaching cannot be false. If the Buddha's teaching is true, Shantao's commentaries cannot be false. If Shantao's commentaries are true, how can Honen's words be empty of meaning? If Honen's words are true, what I, Shinran, say cannot be meaningless. In brief, such is the true entrusting of this foolish one. Now, whether you accept the Nembutsu, entrusting yourselves to it, or reject it, that is your own decision. And I'll go straight to 10. The Master Shinran said, in the Nembutsu, no self-working is true working. It is beyond description, explanation, and conception. Right, where are we going to go with that? Yeah, so basically we're going to look at two questions. We're going to look at what is entrusting or faith, and why is no self working true working. Okay? Should be simple, easy, and straightforward. Yeah. And you know how yesterday we were talking about this key dynamic of Shin practice, where it's like there's two poles. There's the finite conditioned self, and there's entrusting to other power. And like every day, you'll see that we're focusing either on one or the other of those. And today it's again the other power end. Yeah. So this first paragraph of Tanisho 2, where he's had a group of people come to see him, and they've obviously had this long journey. And traveling in Japan, in medieval Japan, was, I believe, not a safe, easy, or straightforward process. So it's like it's actually been quite a sort of dangerous, major undertaking, quite possibly taking weeks or months to get to come and see Shinran. And they turn up, and he says, "Well, I believe the reason you've come here is to, to ascertain, to be sure of the path that leads to the Pure Land. But actually, if you think that I know some other way of getting to the Pure Land, but saying the Nembutsu, like really no, I don't. And if you're looking for a higher teaching or a deeper teaching or something further." Well, why don't you try those monasteries, or they've got great scholars over there, or I believe there's that really good meditation teacher. If that's what you want, go and see them, and they may be able to give you that sort of teaching. But I'm not going to be able to do that. And so he just says, "As for myself, Shinran, I simply take to heart the words of my dear teacher Honen. Just say the Nembutsu and be saved by Amida, and entrust myself to the primal vow. Besides this, there is nothing else." So what he's saying is the total practice is to entrust. That's it. There isn't something else. There isn't something else we're supposed to do. There isn't any hidden or secret practice. That's it. It's very simple. It all centers around faith. So this would seem like a really good moment to kind of go, well, okay, then what is he meaning by faith? Because otherwise it's a bit like, I don't know, trust to Jesus and he'll save you. And it's, and you hear people say that, and you think, it's almost like I've got absolutely no idea how to engage with that statement. It's like, well, okay, what would you like to do about that then? And the Christians who practice like that, no doubt, are practicing on a self-surrender model. So it's not like I'm, sort of dissing that particularly. But we're Buddhists, and so is Shinran. Ha ha ha. So there's probably an implication for this, which is, one is, do we trust we have everything we need? Because actually we will do. Bhante says, well, all you need for insight is 2 lines of the Dhammapada. Do we trust that everything we need for awakening is present within us? If only we can really place our hearts upon it, really trust it, really kind of like emotionally be able to commit to it. And often when that doesn't happen, it's like we're emotionally divided. We might think it's a kind of like, oh, I'm not sure about this, or I'm not sure about that, but underneath all the thinking, there is an emotional lack of trust. There's an emotional lack of ability to place our hearts firmly on the Dharma that we already know, that we do not need to know anything extra about. So when Shinran, what's getting translated as entrusting is Shinjin, okay, Shinjin. And this is made of 2 Japanese kanjis. This is all from Enrique again. I don't know anything about Japanese. And they can both get said shin, which is extremely confusing, isn't it? But in this context, it's Shinjin. And it's the kanji for trust and the kanji for heart-mind. So it's like the trusting heart-mind. And for Shinran, there are 3 aspects of faith. And these get mentioned in the Pure Land Sutras. But Shinran's got his way of interpreting them. So first of all, in Shinran's the 3 aspects of faith, we've got sincere mind, Shishin. So that's Shi, which is truth or reality or sincerity. Okay, so it's sincere mind. And it can also mean to accomplish or to get us there, like the mind that gets us there. And Shin, this is the heart-mind again, seed, kernel, heart-mind. So this is the mind that sees reality as it is and is aware of interconnectedness. And then we've got Shingyo, joyful trust or entrusting. So we've got Shin as in faith and trust there. And it can also mean truth or reality or sincerity or fullness or accomplishment. And Shinran's got a piece where he translates it as all these amazing qualities of mind. And then Gyo, that's delight, joy, gladness. So this is like a joyful heart that opens and can trust, which is like the experience of our heart when we encounter other power. It's like, it's this sense of joy. It's just this sense of like, wow, I can trust this, hooray. And because that heart can trust, it's because the heart can trust that it is possible to let go of self-illusion. That's what makes it possible. And then Shinran's 3rd mind of faith is Yokosuka, aspiration for birth. So Yoko, that's wish or desire. And then Sho is birth or life. But it could also be accomplishment or fulfillment. And what this is the aspiration to be born in the Pure Land. And this is an aspiration for us, but it's also the aspiration to benefit all beings. So it's like we want to be born in the Pure Land. We want to awaken so that we can free all beings. And Shinran says, although there are 3 aspects to Shinjin, to true entrusting, actually they're all one. It's all like the same jewel of faith, and there's just different aspects. So if we compare how Shinran talks about Shinjin to how Bhante talks about Shraddha. So Bhante is drawing on the Abhidharma tradition. And if you don't know the part where he talks about faith in Know Your Mind, just like go and look it up because it's completely amazing. And there's no way I can tell you everything that Bhante says about faith, but it's really Know Your Mind, such an amazing book. But he's explicating from a brief text from the Abhidharma, which says, Shraddha is a deep conviction, lucidity and longing for those things which are real, have value, and are possible. And then Bhante then splits this out also into 3 aspects of faith. And actually, do you know what? When you look at the Buddhist traditions, all sorts of people that have split out 3 aspects of faith in slightly different ways, but we're going to stick to 2 of them. Bhante draws out a cognitive or rational aspect to faith, like a deep conviction of what is real, a deep understanding of and an ardent desire for what is true. So this is a kind of understanding aspect. We meet a Dharma teaching and we think, yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then his second aspect is intuition, lucidity as to what has value. So you get this lucid, clear aspect of faith. And it's a recognition on a deep emotional level of value. It's that heart response where it's like you meet something and you might not intellectually understand it, but there's something almost like in the cells of your being that are vibrating and they're just going, yes, yes, yes. And it may take years to be able to explain to yourself rationally why it is you've got that kind of, yes, I'm going in that direction. And there's this clarity aspect to it because, Bhante says there are certain things one is going to do and certain things one is not going to do. Things become very clear when the heart of our life becomes the Dharma. And then Bhante's third aspect of faith is the volitional or the experience-based, longing for what is possible. And in a way, like that's what we were doing with the meditation yesterday, with this sitting in relation. It's like that can be, that can be the practice, which is just sitting as we are and allowing our longing for what is possible. And so Bhante phrases this in very self-development terms. So he says, it's faith in our own power to do the practices and realise the truth. It's confidence that we can attain the path and the goal. And when we realise that we can, we will. So that's very, very beautiful from a self-development point of view. And also it's perfectly possible. Well, you can see with Shinran's, one direction, not 3 directions, one direction. Okay, so if we look at both Bhante's and Shinran's third minds of faith, you can see that they're sort of parallel, but they're like opposite sides of the same coin. So we've got Bhante saying confidence that we can attain the path. But then from Shinran's point of view, this is aspiration. This is just like wanting to be born in the Pure Land, like longing for that, thinking that this is possible, like enlightenment is possible for us. Not for somebody else like over there. It's like awakening can happen for us, and letting that longing be alive, letting that grow and be what directs our lives. That is a force that will be stronger than anything else if we can give it space, if we can allow it. If we can allow it to be present for us. And you can see actually that there is, there's similarity between the first 2 of Shinran's and Bhante's 3 minds of the Dharma. So, the sincere mind of Shinran again, you know, that for Shinran, that's about directly responding to seeing impermanence and interconnectedness. So it's got more of that, like, I understand, this makes sense. And the joyful entrusting, well, that's emotional. And the lucid mind, that's our intuition, that's the emotional part for Bhante. It's like they're both emotional responses to encountering the Dharma. So you can see that there's relationship between those three minds. Now, where there is difference is so in Triratna we would typically think of like my faith. I've got really strong faith in that, or I met the Dharma and I had a really strong faith response. So we think of faith as being ours. Yeah, we think of it as a quality of our personhood, our selfhood. And so did Pure Land Buddhists before Shinran. So in the Pure Land Sutras, those three minds that Shinran's talking about, those are the minds that the Pure Land practitioner is trying to cultivate in order to be receptive to the vow of Amida. Yeah. So Shinran's innovation is, so quite often with Shinran, I just get this image of like, there's a sort of cup and it's this way up, and Shinran takes it and he goes, oh no, it's not supposed to be that way up, it's supposed to be that way up. So he takes this idea of faith and he says, faith is never ours. Faith does not belong to us. Faith is a quality of the enlightened mind. Faith can be endowed to us, we can experience it. But that is Amida's mind endowed to us. Faith is never ours. So this is a stronger way of putting what Bhante says when he says, when faith is categorized as lucidity and longing, it is tinged with the transcendental. When, as a Buddhist, one has faith, one goes for refuge to the three jewels, and the determination to go for refuge carries that transcendent trace. So it's like he's talking about the same thing, but from a self-development perspective. But actually, we can talk about setting up conditions for faith, or, do puja to cultivate faith, or and that's all a perfectly valid way of looking at it. It's just not Shinran's way of looking at it, okay? Nothing the matter with that. When Bhante's talking about the determination to go for refuge carries that transcendent trace. Well, actually, it is not within the power of the small, selfing, conditioned mind to produce the transcendent. That does not happen. That does not happen. So this is Bhante from the survey again. He says, there is an absolute discontinuity of the transcendental and the mundane. The real is not to be attained by means of a series of increments of the unreal. So what he means by unreal is the conditioned, things that are put together that change, okay? And by real, he's talking about the limitless, the infinite, however you want to think about it. The next bit. In the last resort, emancipation depends upon the eruption into the universe of a factor that confronts our ego consciousness as the other power. So when Shinran's talking about Shinjin as a gift of Amida, like faith always just given to us as this sort of free gift that we can never earn, we can never deserve, we can never make ourselves into a good person so we get it, and we can never be such a bad person that we're not going to receive that. Those whole kind of, that whole sort of notion just doesn't make sense. But we might think about that as like Shinjin being like faith, like there's this big bang and everything falls apart and we're just like, wow, I just want to give myself to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And of course, it can be like that. That would be a peak experience moment. Those experiences do happen on occasion. But I wouldn't worry if they don't happen to you or they don't happen terribly often, because this isn't particular, Shinjin, it includes that. But what Shinran is talking about is that Shinjin, faith, is present in the smallest movements of our mind towards awakening. So it's like the first time we ever thought, oh, I saw that poster, maybe I'll go along to that meditation class. Or the first time we thought, oh, do you know what? I read that thing by the Dalai Lama and it really struck me. Yeah, maybe there's something in this. Or the first time we went along to a class or a centre and something happened in us where we thought, oh, I feel quite at home here. Or no, there's something important happening here and I need to know what it is. Or that person, there's something in how they're relating to other people and it's different. What is it? Ooh, in all those movements of our mind in the direction of awakening, that is Amida's mind endowed to us. That is something transcendental in our own nature awakening. So this is Bhante talking about faith as what is infinite in us resonating with what is infinite in the universe. And actually, if we were not of the nature of reality, it would not, that resonance would not happen. It's like we're experiencing this as self and other, limited mind, and Amida's gift of Shinjin. But actually, if we were not all part of this unconditioned flow of things as they are, there would be no resonance. This would not awaken within us. So I think what this means is there's something about noticing when those moments of Shinjin or faith arise. Because I think a lot of the time we don't notice unless it's quite kind of like big and it's got kind of like flashy lights and stuff. So, that moment where we get up in the morning and we're feeling pretty groggy and it's not our best day ever, and we sort of think, oh, okay, well, I could meditate, and we sit down. Shinjin is present. It's like the mind of Amida endowed to us is present in that moment. And if we recognise that and kind of know it and honour it and kind of go, oh yeah, that is Shinjin present in me at this moment, it does something. So the Buddha says, what we dwell on, that we become. So if we notice these kind of slightly hidden moments of Shinjin, it grows, it becomes this power in our life. So Shinran talks about the Nembutsu as an appreciation response, gratitude for the gift of Shinjin. So this is where in Tanisho 8, he's talking about chanting the Nembutsu, calling on the measureless Buddha. He's saying, well, that's not a practice and it's not a good act. And what he's meaning by that is, well, we've already been given the gift of Shinjin. So even when we think of chanting the Nembutsu, even if we think of chanting a mantra, sitting to meditate, making an offering to a shrine, doing a kind thing for a neighbour, as that, the very first moment of that act kind of like arising in us, that's a moment of Shinjin. And as we realise that, well, what is the natural response to being given a gift? It's appreciation, it's sort of happiness. It's like, oh, wow, this has arisen in me. How amazing, how wonderful. So all our practices are simply actions of appreciation and gratitude for living in a cosmos where awakening is possible and currents of awakening are present in our lives too. I really love that, actually. I really love that. And I'm not sure this is totally following, but let's go with it anyway. Yeah. So it's like our limited selves encountering the enlightened mind. One response is gratitude, and the other response is love. I was trying to find this actually, and I couldn't find it. So it's a quote from Banti where he sort of says, "We needs must love the infinite when we see it." So it's not quite that. So if anybody knows where that quote's from, they can tell me later. But there's this sort of natural sense of devotion that arises, and that's not kind of manufactured. It's just sort of inherent in the limited mind encountering the limitless. And again, in our culture, it's very easy to discount a sense of devotion and just sort of think, oh, well, that's, that's just like a nice fluffy feeling I'm feeling on the side, but it doesn't mean anything. Well, actually, it does mean something. It is part of our being resonating and responding to a sort of limitless compassion or a limitless awareness or a limitless wisdom. Even if we don't quite know what's going on, like a sense of devotion, that is us just going, I want to move towards that. That is amazing. A sense of awe, a sense of reverence, and a sense that like this is more precious than anything else in our lives. So I think Rumi is really, really good on this. Rumi, the Sufi poet, and he's just got this whole thing. Poems after poems dedicated to the beloved. So I'm going to read you a little bit of Rumi, which is just expressing this sense of longing that we are trying to allow to grow in our lives. I don't get tired of you. Don't grow weary of being compassionate toward me. I have a thirsty fish in me that can never find enough of what it's thirsty for. Show me the way to the ocean. Break these half measures, these small containers. All this fantasy and grief. Let my house be drowned in the wave that rose last night out of the courtyard hidden in the centre of my chest. So then let's go on to this final section of Tanisho 2. So this is the bit where Shinran's got almost like a sort of conditionality chain of faith, where he says, if Amida's primal vow is true, Shakyamuni's teaching cannot be false. If the Buddha's teaching is true, Shantao's commentaries cannot be false. If Shantao's commentaries are true, how can Honen's words be empty of meaning? If Honen's words are true, what I, Shinran, say cannot be meaningless. In brief, such is the true entrusting of this foolish one. Now, whether you accept the Nembutsu, entrusting yourselves to it, or reject it, that is your own decision. I just love that bit at the end. I'm not quite sure what it does for me, but it's the bit about, he's just saying, for myself, I am completely convinced that his enlightenment is possible and this is the way. But it's totally up to you. It's totally up to you whether you want to follow that or not. There's something about that I really, really like, but I'm not quite sure how to articulate what it is. Yeah. Okay, so when I first came across this text, the order of that conditionality faith thing seems wrong. It's like, if Amida's primal vow is true, then Shakyamuni Buddha's teaching cannot be false. I'm like, hang on a sec, surely like the historical Buddha is primary, Amida came later. How does that work? But what Shinran is pointing at is, he's using the language of Amida's primal vow. Okay, so in Triratna terms, what would that be? It's more like he's saying, if Dharma Niyama processes exist, Shakyamuni's teaching cannot be false. If we live in a universe where conditionality includes the process of awakening, what the Buddha taught must have a sound basis. If we do not live in a universe where enlightenment is possible, the Buddha could have said what he liked, but actually enlightenment would not be possible. So this is where Amida's primal vow is primary. Dharma Niyama is primary. So to kind of give us another perspective on Amida's primal vow, this is a suprapersonal force talking about Dharma Niyama. So you listen to this just thinking, and this is what Shinran is talking about with Amida's primal vow. The Dharma is, in its most important meaning, the way things truly are as a dynamic cosmic principle. The Dharma Niyama is the kind of conditionality that comes into play when one sees the Dharma directly for oneself, especially by breaking free of the illusion of a separate selfhood. The stream of the Dharma is that flow of dharmic conditionality, conceived as a spontaneous, non-egoic force that carries one who has decisively broken the self-illusion further and further into selflessness. So we're thinking of Amida's primal vow as this spontaneous, non-egoic force, this flow of dharmic conditionality. Now, there's an implication to this. There's an implication to this, which is that Shinran is talking about spiritual death. Okay? He is talking about the mind of Amida endowed to him as insight experience. Okay? And if it wasn't that I felt like I'd just be reading out everything Banti ever said on the topic, I'd read out something else about I suppose what it is it's like we're looking at, so Shinran's talking about Shinjin being present in these smallest movements towards practice. And actually, if you look in 7 papers, maybe I'll put this quote up and then I don't have to read it. It also talks about Dharma Niyama processes first being felt as a pull to self-transcendence or a glimpse of life beyond self-clinging. So also Bhante and Subhuti are talking about Dharma Niyama processes being present in experience from the very first moments of turning towards a Dharma life. The difference with Shinran is this is his total path. His total path is you turn towards Dharma Niyama processes, you notice them, you honour them, and that is the total path. So then if we have, I'm going to show 10 again, just find that. The Master Shinran said, in the Nembutsu, no self-working is true working. It is beyond description, explanation, and conception. Does that remind you of anything? Like the perfection of wisdom, possibly? So you've got this sort of culmination of the first part of the Tanisho, where Shinran is just saying really directly, the Nembutsu is the mind of Amida. When we say the Nembutsu, that means the mind of Amida is arising in us. And it is beyond description, explanation, and conception. And this is because Shinjin, it's like insight arising in us at whatever level we are able to open to it. So, we think of it as being like, there's a point called stream entry. So like before stream entry, no insight. And then after stream entry, it all kind of goes kabow. Shinran is giving a picture that is much more graduated. And he's saying, notice in your experience right now. So every time we are experiencing Shinjin or other power opening to a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, what that is it's like, that is, there's a level where that is insight experience. That is Dharma Niyama processes. That is the nature of things outside of our egoic view of reality, impinging upon us and saying, hello, it's like this, it's bigger than you think. Drop your ideas about how things are. So we'll be exploring this more tomorrow, how faith, in Shinran's terms, is actually insight. True entrusting is a spiritual death practice. So just to finish with something else Bhante says. Again, he's talking about the Pure Land schools in the survey, and he says, faith of this kind is not faith in the current sense of the term, but the emotional counterpart of wisdom. Though prajna is a word of predominantly intellectual connotation. I love the way Bhante writes. It would be committing a dangerous mistake to suppose that the transcendental faculty for which it stands is a species of intellection in the ordinary dualistic sense, or that it would not be possible to indicate that faculty by a word of predominantly emotional connotation. So basically what he's saying is, usually we say prajna, wisdom, insight. And he's saying for Shinran, he's using the term faith, but the faculty, the transcendental faculty, our faculty for perceiving, what is things as they really are. Shinran calls this faith, and so can we. So can we. Okay, so we're going to have a 1/4 of an hour break.